Hi, guys, and welcome to the first official episode of the Mind Behind the Brain talk show. Today, we are joined here by Sam Gerry. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm doing well, Frank. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So, if you guys don't know, Sam is he does a lot, but he plays golf for Bates College. He's a mental health advocate. He starts nonprofits, foundations, so he's a part of a lot. He has a hand in a lot. So, I kind of want to start there. I kind of want to talk about how you manage your time first, because you do have your hands in all the things, and I know, and I'm personally, I know I can attest to this too. It can be stressful to kind of do a lot of things at once. So how do you personally kind of manage your time?
Certainly, yeah. I think as much as they suck at times, deadlines are so important and are really kind of a savior. At least with projects that deadlines can be applied to. So, say for example, a lot of my mental health work, or a lot of my stuff, like you mentioned, Kick It for a Cause Inc., the nonprofit that I run, always making sure that we're hitting our deadlines to make sure that we're progressing the way that we need to be. I've definitely gone in the past without having deadlines, and that could get really messy really quickly, where you just kind of find yourself pushing things off. Whether it be with golf, like you said, at Bates College, competing as a collegiate athlete, juggling the mental health advocacy work, and then also a pretty intensive workload. So deadlines really important, just making sure you're as organized as possible, utilizing things, like Google Calendars, all of that good stuff, to making sure you're really staying in line. And while it's still certainly difficult, unfortunately, it's really difficult to make those things easy. It definitely lightens the load and makes it all just a little bit easier, which is great.
Oh, that's great advice. I love it. Thank you. So my next question is, I know you have a nonprofit called Kick It for a Cause, which is kind of like a kickball kind of. Yeah, I'll let you explain it a little bit more, but and then you're a golfer as well. So talk about the role sports has played in terms of your own personal mental health.
Certainly, yeah. So sport has been so critical to really my upbringing, like you alluded to. So Kick It is our annual kickball tournament supporting suicide prevention. So essentially, in my hometown of Woburn, Massachusetts, we'll hold kind of this big kickball tournament, which is a lot of fun. Actually, a buddy of mine from high school, his name is Noah Dollywall. We started Kick It for a Cause Inc. together. He ran track and played football in high school. I was a golfer in high school. So sports were incredibly important to us, and we mind melded and decided that we should really hold an intramural sports tournament. Just seeing how much these sports have done for us, and wanting to give it back to the community in some way. That was something that we really liked the idea of, and something that was different. A lot of the times, um, suicide prevention fundraisers or initiatives are usually followed by maybe not necessarily like boring events. I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of harsh, but because we're talking about such like moros and sometimes really heavy topics, people are afraid to venture out a little bit and try to not necessarily make it lighthearted, but make it a bit more enjoyable. So that's been a blast. And then obviously, like you said, I'm going to be a junior this year at Bates College up in Lewiston, Maine. I've been a competitive golfer for probably almost 10 years now, which has been a ton
Wow.
of fun. Like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, makes the workload more difficult, but it's been really formidable, and it's been, as far as just my personal mental health journey, being able to kind of escape to the golf course and really just kind of forget about everything else except for my game, has been so instrumental, especially these past few years where we feel like everything's just kind of going wrong. So
You're right. Yeah.
sports in general has been it. Sports in general have been really close to my heart, and it's really kind of done wonders for my own mental health.
I love that. Thank you. So kind of going back to high school is where I believe you started with your whole mental health journey, and I know you dealt with some personal stuff yourself. So talk about um, first where how you became an advocate, and then second, when you realized that mental health was something that was important and that needs to be talked about a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the first time I really kind of became an advocate, for lack of a better term, was
Yeah.
actually an opportunity that arose through the American Junior Golf Association. So essentially, like AAU basketball for golf.
Right.
They have this thing called Leadership Links, in which the junior golfers are able to fundraise or kind of just support a cause that they're passionate about. I chose suicide prevention. I shared my story.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, earlier years, like freshman, sophomore year, I dealt with some pretty um, pretty extreme depression, anxiety, and unfortunately suicidality, and I really kind of left it all on the line. So that was really my introduction. Also another connection to golf, and then really from there, understanding where I needed help, and kind of it's been a weird it's been a weird kind of balance between working to support mental health just in general as an advocate, and then supporting my own mental health as an individual, as someone with lived experience, as someone who's struggling. So I think a lot of that has to do with, or a lot of that is has been through a lot of self-reflection and recognizing that, I need help. I need to go see someone, and I need to reach out for support. It's one of those things where you don't want to you really want to practice what you preach, I guess,
Right.
I guess is what you want to say. And making sure that your mental health comes before the work that you're doing, as frustrating as that may be sometimes. It's so incredibly instrumental, and is really the only reason why I'm able to do what I'm doing right now.
100%. I totally get that, and I think kind of. I mean, we don't obviously we just met today, but I think our stories kind of align in the sense that we're both a couple of years removed from high school. And I started a chapter at my high school of a mental health organization as well, and I kind of know the perception that you get as maybe being the mental health kid or being the guy that always talks about mental health or advocating for something or whatever. But I kind of want to talk about the perception that you received at your high school or maybe in college now, and how people have really, attracted to what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I totally feel that sentiment where sometimes everyone's like, oh, why does this kid like only talk about like suicide prevention and mental health? So I totally feel that, I've been really lucky to where the support has almost exclusively been positive, or at least like to my face. Everyone's been so kind and so supportive. Maybe it's one of those things where they don't want to be seen as like the person who's bad mouthing like mental health or whatever. But that's besides the point. It's been so inspiring to hear from so many incredible individuals, whether they themselves are survivors or have lived experience, or just have some really compelling connection to mental health, whether they've experienced it or not. Has been one of the most gratifying parts of this entire thing. Throughout high school, I think when I first got started, I don't think people were necessarily surprised. Maybe they were surprised that I was someone who was struggling, and maybe you wouldn't have assumed that I was someone who would struggle with mental health challenges. Um, everyone was incredibly supportive, and making that transition into college, I was definitely worried how people would perceive it. I was fortunate to where I had some larger scale success, but at the same time, what I'm doing like is very much, and what we're doing is really outside of the norm. And while I think I am kind of making up things in my head to where I feel like people are maybe not not viewing what I'm doing favorably or whatever it might be, or might be getting annoyed of what I'm doing because I talk about it so much. I think in reality, and like I said, from what I've heard from people, it's all been positive, and it's been so cool to be able to see the change that all of us as advocates have been able to make together, especially within colleges, as we've seen these past couple of months and these past couple of years, how important just talking about this stuff is. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey so far.
That's great. I love it. So obviously, we know that mental health is very subjective to our own personal feelings, and we can't really control. I mean, everybody goes through a mental health, something related to mental health in general, but the experience that we experience through it is different for everybody. So, kind of talk about how you advise people, or maybe consult people about what they're going through, even though you might know that what they're facing is different from what you face.
Certainly, yeah, and you really nailed it on the head there. That's the first thing that I'll say is, um, whatever you do, avoid comparison.
Right.
I think one really tricky situation we oftentimes find ourselves in is we feel the need to compare our traumas and our hardships with those around us, or even maybe figures within the media or figures within pop culture, and then within ourselves, we we say, oh, my struggle isn't as bad as theirs, my experiences aren't valid, or vice versa. So I think really first and foremost, I say just be flexible, be open. There are so many opportunities for treatment and support, whether it be the more like traditional therapy route, with a counselor, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. There are also a lot of peer support programs. For me, one way in which I've really coped with what I'm doing is doing this work, doing this advocacy work. So there are so many different routes in which you can support yourself on a consistent basis. But I really like the way in which you worded that, and really just saying that it's so different for everyone, and it's really tough to compare. So really just be willing to explore your options, and then really, if one thing doesn't work, just move on to the next and see what else works.
Gotcha. Yeah, great advice. So I watched one of your recent interviews, who I'm guessing is your partner now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But you said that your mom told you that if you're helping yourself, you're helping somebody. And I love that quote. I thought it was a great line. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that, but kind of talk about, um, how that may have pushed you to talk a little bit more openly about what you're going through, and then also who or what was that thing that kind of, told you, okay, I'm gonna live another day, or I'm gonna try to push this out another day. I'm gonna reach for something greater.
Certainly, yeah. So the quote really stems from this idea that when I was talking with my mom, or I was talking with my parents about the work that I'm doing, I was always way too focused on how many people it was reaching, and how many people I was touching throughout the process. And my mom said this one really cool thing to me is, um, like you said, or one thing that we would kind of talk about is, this is all worth it if one person is able to find some joy or whatever it might be from, or inspiration from the work that I'm doing. So if this reaches one person, it's all worth it. And it's this own work, my own work is really helping and supporting me. Therefore, it's all worth it.
Right.
It's definitely one thing I fail to recognize kind of often, that not only is my work in pursuit of supporting others, this work is also supporting myself, just my own mental well-being and all that stuff. So it's been, whenever I'm struggling, or I feel like, oh, I'm not getting the numbers I want to be getting. I'm not getting as many people seeing or liking my posts, and while it's certainly not a mindset we want to be in, I feel like sometimes it's kind of inevitable. I always kind of remind myself that this is all worth it if you're helping one person, and it's helping me. Kind of to answer the second part of your question there, talking about what really motivates and inspires me to live another day when I'm struggling. I think one phrase that I've gone back to a lot is, and while kind of morbid at times, it's if I'm not living for myself, I'm living for those around me.
Mhm.
I think one thing that I've that's become increasingly prevalent throughout my work in this space is the ripple effect, is real when it comes to mental health, period, or suicide and suicide prevention, kind of that space. Unfortunately, thinking about what would happen if I had taken my own life. How would my family react? My mom, my dad, my brother and sister. My grandparents, my friends, all of that stuff. Um, Thinking about that is really sobering. It really, to me personally, it really grounds me, and it keeps me in the moment, and reminds me why I do the work that I do. However, kind of going back to that point where, it's not a one size fits all. Mental health is never really one size fits all as far as treatments or mindsets or whatever it might be. For some people, that may make their symptoms worse or whatever it might be. So it's a mindset that works for me, but it's definitely something that may not work for everyone.
No, 100%. And for those people that you kind of turned your pain into like a I guess a passion in a sense, and use it to kind of help other people. But for the people that can't, are stuck in this place right now where they can't find any boost or any loophole to kind of get themselves up out of what they're going through, what would you tell them?
Certainly, I think I think the first thing that I tell them is I'm just so proud of you. I think a lot of people undermine just how challenging it can be to fight through mental health challenges, whether it be um, dealing with depression, anxiety, and eating disorder, psychosis, schizophrenia,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. I think a lot of times, one thing that and there's no um, objective truth to this, but one thing I've kind of noticed is that the more that we talk about mental health, we need to make sure or really ensure that we're validating everyone's experiences. We can't just be because mental health challenges are becoming more prevalent amongst our friend groups and our families. Not necessarily more prevalent as far as diagnoses, but more so just in the way in which we talk about it. We need to make sure that we're always recognizing that no matter how many people are struggling with these disorders or just mental health challenges, they're all really, really difficult to navigate. So I think the biggest thing would say is I'm so proud of you, really just emphasizing this idea that there's no one size fits all fix to mental health challenges. And unfortunately, there isn't really a magic pill or a solution that will solve itself in a day. Unfortunately, there is a bit of patience involved with that. Say, for example, with antidepressants or anxiety medication, SSRIs, that kind of stuff. Usually they have a few weeks, even to a month, 2 months before they even kick in. A lot of it has to do with patience, just finding the right fit. I'd say the one thing as well when you're seeking treatment, don't settle for something that's working for you. Don't feel like, oh, because you're in therapy and you're given this opportunity. If it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit, and it's okay to move on. Really ensuring that you're doing what you can to support your mental health in the best way possible, without settling for less and going through treatment that or you think isn't as effective as it could be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I kind of want to transition a little bit into language a little bit and how we kind of label people in a sense, because wording with mental health can be very can play a big factor in everything that we do, especially when we use words like suicide and ideation and things of that nature. So kind of talk about the role of language and how that may prevent or make people want to commit or harm themselves.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I really, really love this question. I think a lot of people just kind of take the language and verbiage we use for granted. And there are really two parts of it. I mean, for me, because I'm really heavily in suicide prevention, there's a way in which we speak about suicide, but also just mental health in general. I think one rule of thumb that I think is really good is avoiding using adjectives as nouns. So say, for example, say someone um, or other way around. I totally messed it up. But essentially, in saying that he's depressed, say he is someone with depression, like little things like that. Also avoiding saying things like, "Oh, he's insane," or "he's going to the insane asylum," or like little things like that that we kind of take for granted and are so normalized. And it's really, really difficult to break those barriers of language. Especially when they are so normalized. And one that really comes to mind and one that really hits home for me is commit suicide. Back in the United States throughout the 20th century, in many states, suicide was a crime. However, these days it is absolutely not. And saying commit suicide, while on the surface it may not seem like it does much, if we make these little changes as individuals, over time it'll really start to make a difference. People commit fraud, people commit murder, people don't commit suicide. So really just being aware and cognizant of how we're using that language, and then also being mindful about the people who are listening or who are hearing. So, say whether you're some sort of media group who who's sharing their content with hundreds of thousands of people, making sure you're following those reporting guidelines, or whether you're just an individual, kind of like I'm saying, changing the few phrases we use pretty commonly, avoiding saying commit suicide and say died by suicide or something of the sort. Language is so incredibly important, and I think it's one of the most powerful ways, as individuals and as groups, we can really tackle stigma.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down a little bit more to the audience watching. So I want to talk. I want to talk about something that you're doing now. It's the Living Underturd tour. Am I saying that right? Okay, so
Yeah.
kind of yeah. So kind of elaborate on that and what is that going to be? I know it's a free event for people that just want to learn. So kind of I'm gonna let you have the floor and you can talk a little bit more about what that is.
Certainly, yeah. So the Living Underturd tour is an initiative started actually by a good advocate friend of mine, Jeff Johnston. He actually lost his son in 2016, I believe, to a fentanyl poisoning. And essentially, what he's been doing with this, his work is incredible. He has a podcast, he wrote a book, and now he's going on this nationwide tour, essentially sharing his experiences, his thoughts on kind of the current state of mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. And it's been really cool to see. We were his Massachusetts partner, and we actually just recently had our event, but he's traveling around the country. So I think in a couple days, as we're recording this, he'll be in Connecticut, then he'll be in Kentucky. I think his next wave of events will be in the Southeast. So he'll be in Atlanta. He'll be in, I think, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, all over the place, doing it all in this crazy big van. So super, super interesting initiative. I definitely recommend checking out. It's either livingunderturd.com or .org, and seeing if there's a stop near you. It was so cool to be able to hear from him at our event a few days ago. He's such an incredibly inspiring individual, and even if you just read through his story, it's just so awesome to see the change that he's making on such a large scale. So it's been a real pleasure for us to be able to collaborate with him over the past couple of years, and then work with him throughout this project.
That's really cool. It's really cool that he's doing that. I think that needs to be done more. To be honest with you. So my last question to you is there anything that you want to accomplish that will maybe solidify everything that you're doing, or wraps up everything that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I actually don't think I've ever been asked that question before. I definitely have a lot of goals as far as my mental health advocacy goes. Most of them being really revolved around people, in the sense that making sure that we're supporting everyone that we possibly can, and making sure that we're not only supporting individuals but also similar organizations who are doing this work. But I think one kind of goal, and maybe this is a bit broad, is really seeing sharp declines in suicide rates is definitely a goal. I think you could kind of say that one goal of mine would be to see zero suicides. Is that ever going to happen? No. So that means we've got a long way to go. It sounds kind of negative and pessimistic. The unfortunate truth behind it is that suicide is such a social and biological phenomenon, to where it would be just about impossible to eradicate it entirely. But I guess if there's one goal where I could peacefully step away from mental health and suicide prevention, it would be seeing zero suicides. Although these past couple of years, actually a lot of people don't know, throughout the pandemic, we've seen a bit of a decrease in suicides. We don't know if that'll be consistent with over the next couple of years, although fingers crossed it does. I want to say it's been about 6% over the past 2 years. We don't have data for 2021 yet. I know for 2019, 2019 and 2020, suicide rates went down both years. It's impossible to pinpoint why, but it's something we're certainly looking at optimistically. And if that remains to be the case, then really kind of just plugging away and ensuring, while we're always seeking new innovative ways to help prevent suicide, making sure that we're really keeping those things that are working around. So long-winded answer there. I think the one overarching goal is to eliminate suicide, even though it might be impossible, but just lowering suicide rates, period, is so incredibly special to see. And I look forward to remaining in this field as long as I possibly can.
No, that's 100%. I think that's a great goal, and I think people advocating for it or maybe pushing just in general who have it or deal with it every day, I think they're pushing for the same thing. So, Sam, I want to thank you for being a part of the show today. I was kind of thinking about how to make the show different from all the other ones. So I don't know. I'm sure somebody else is doing this out there, but I kind of want to ask you a question. For us, where can we? I want to personally, or my company, I want to donate to something that you're doing. So let me know. Do you have a goal that you're trying to reach right now? Or do you have I know Kick for a Cause is out there, but do you have something specifically that you would like us to donate to?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we're working on a project that'll be launching in the fall. So we're working with Social Capital Inc. So it's a small nonprofit here in Massachusetts where we'll be working within public schools in the greater Boston area, so around Boston. And essentially, teams of middle schoolers and high schoolers will have the opportunity to, like I mentioned, form teams, come together, work with. Each team will be assigned kind of like an advisor, and essentially they'll be able to think up and create new initiatives for schools that they want to see implemented. And the teams winning will be awarded a couple $1,000s each. So,
Wow.
so yeah, that's been fun, fun idea to plan out. Obviously, as all of this stuff goes, fundraising is not easy. So
Right.
so yeah, that's one new project we've been working on recently.
Sounds good. Well, Sam, I will definitely donate to that. And I kind of want people to kind of let people know where they can find you, how they can reach out to you, how they can donate themselves. So I'll let you kind of do your spiel right now.
Certainly, yeah. Thank you so much. So, all information about Kick It can be found at kickitforacause.org. On Instagram, we're at Kick It for a Cause. On Twitter, I think we're at KickItFAC. Personally, you can find me at Sam V. Gerry pretty much everywhere. And then if you'd like to donate to Kick It, we have a donation page on our website as well. So all information about us, what we do, our kickball tournament, and even a merchandise shop, all of that stuff that we do is up on there and available.
Well, thank you, Sam. You've been a great first guest on the show. Mind Behind the Brain. We appreciate you coming on and talking and sharing your story. Stick with me after on the line for a minute, and thank you guys for joining today.